Welcome to A State of Mind. This is Julian Royce. I am happy today to be bringing you a new episode. Today I'm speaking with Bill Byrnes. Bill is a leader in men's work. He leads groups and individuals to reclaim their authenticity and to show up in wholeness. And as we talk about in our conversation today, it's quite rare in our world, in our society, especially in mainstream society, to have spaces that are just for men, that are dedicated to their healing, their growth, to deepening their connection with themselves and others. And we really need that. We need more of that. It was a large part of, I believe, pretty much every traditional society to have spaces that were for men and spaces that were for women. And if we want to expand that umbrella, we could have spaces for non-binary and other kinds of people as well. So having a space just for men doesn't mean that there can't be spaces for people that identify in different ways. It doesn't have to be exclusionary in any kind of negative sense. I think it's important to advocate for that. There's a lot of value in coming together in a group. I myself have found a lot of value and help and support in participating in men's groups, and I often recommend them for clients I work with. There's something different about it. The energy is different, and the way that you can show up and receive support and love from other men is something really special and something we need more of in our world. Certainly not something we need less of. And so I really value people who are doing that work and offering that. And I connected with Bill through working with the Unison Festival. Bill is helping to create the Sacred Masculine Lodge at the Unison Festival this year. Unison is a transformational music festival happening in a few weeks here. And actually, I think it's September 5th is the first day, so about a week from today. And there's going to be a space there with workshops specifically for men, people who identify as men, as male. And then there's also a women's lodge there, or a women's space, like a red tent. And I'm excited to be a part of that space. I'm going to be offering a workshop there called Embodying the Sacred Masculine. It's going to be this Saturday at Unison Festival. And in the evening, we're going to open up that space and do a tea lounge. We're going to serve tea, and I'm going to play some music there Friday evening around 11 p.m. So if you are coming, if you're thinking about coming, definitely look into it. There's still some tickets available, I believe. And come find me there. Come check out my offerings and come by the men's lodge. It's going to be open up to everyone at night, and in the day it'll be a space for workshops for men. We hear so much in today's world about toxic masculinity, and in the mainstream media at least, we don't hear that much about the positive sides of masculinity, about positive ideals of what it can look like and be like and feel like to be a man in today's world, one with integrity, with authenticity, who's showing up in his full capacity to help and to support, and we need that. And so I think there's a lot of value in articulating what that can look like. And for those of you who have a spiritual leaning, to call it sacred, there's something valuable and important about that too. The sacred female, the sacred masculine, the sacred world that we live in, that we can see this world that we live in through the lens, through the perspective that it's actually sacred, that it's actually special, that it's actually, there's an ineffable essence to it that we can't quite define. It's something more than reductionist, materialistic science can point to. At least that's where I'm coming from and what I want to offer people. And it's interesting that this perspective, this vision, might be a better word for it, of seeing the world and what makes up the world, the plants, the animals, the landscape, the sun, the moon, the stars, all of it, to see it as sacred in a fundamental level. It's something that's common to indigenous traditions across the world. And of course, it's a key component of Buddhism, the Buddhist traditions from India, and especially in Tibet. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that element to this podcast and speak to that more. So whatever those words mean to you, perhaps you can take a moment to open up to that possibility and experiment for yourself. What would it look like? What would it feel like? What would shift in my reality to consider that view of seeing things? Especially things like conflict or challenges or problems that we have. We could see them from that fundamentally positive lens, and that can, I think, give us some more energy and we can take more action. I also want to mention here that I am offering an integration group. This is a group for people who are wanting to learn about integration. It applies to people who are doing psychedelic-assisted therapy or psychedelic work, but it can also apply to anyone, meditators, anyone interested in personal growth. I've really oriented the group and the offering there to support everyone in their path, because the word integration means wholeness. And so anyone on a path of personal development, of growth, of healing, is in a sense on a path of integration, in an important sense. In fact, integration, I think, is the fundamental concept, the fundamental orienting intelligence within us that's differentiating what needs, the different parts of ourselves, but then integrating them into a larger whole. And so I am really passionate about integration. If you're interested in joining this group or future ones, please send me an email. You can find my email at astateofmindcounseling.org. There's a message box on there, or astateofmindcounsel@gmail.com is my email also. And then I'm going to start offering trauma-informed training for people who are working with people, either one-on-one or in groups. It's going to be geared more towards, it will be open to people who are therapists and psychologists and psychotherapists as well, but it will also be geared towards people who are doing healing work in the world, but maybe they're not a licensed therapist. Maybe you're a yoga teacher, maybe you're a meditation teacher, maybe you are leading ceremonies or workshops or coaching, all of that kind of stuff. And you want to learn more about trauma and how to be a trauma-informed facilitator, coach, leader. This trauma-informed training is for you. I just started off with one person as a kind of experiment. I'm working with them one-on-one. I'm teaching them about trauma and how to work with people. They actually work as a birth doula. And so they're working a lot with women and with the birthing process. And it's been interesting to work with them because the process of birth itself is traumatic one way or another. That doesn't mean it's bad or negative. It means that it's a huge transition for the baby, for the child, and for the mother. Obviously, some births are more traumatic than others, but that's something that we get into, how to distinguish trauma on a spectrum from what we could call little t traumas, the big T traumas, and getting into more nuance and depth with that. So that's an example of something that I'm doing with them, but I'm going to be offering a group training with that in the near future. If you're interested in that, again, send me an email or a message through my website or social media, and I can put you on the wait list, and I can let you know when that comes together and I'm ready to offer that. So that'll be a trauma-informed training, and I think it's really needed in the world. I think there's a lot of good information out there about trauma, but many people who are leaders or who are offering workshops, things like that, they're not actually trauma-informed, and that can be dangerous. So that's the point of this training. It will add to your skill set and help make you a more effective facilitator. And now, without further ado, I bring you Bill Byrnes. So I'm here today with Bill Byrnes. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to get to talk to you, and I know you work a lot with men and the men's work and men's movement, and I'm excited to have an episode specifically around that. I had one episode a while ago with Michael Gay, who I went to graduate school with, who does a lot of men's groups and men's work, and I want to delve into this more on the podcast and hear about you. How would you introduce yourself and what you're doing in the world?
Yeah, I would introduce myself as a guide and facilitator and leader. And guide, first of all, because the work that I lead is mostly with professional men, CEOs, entrepreneurs, men that are very focused on financial and business, quote, outward success, as it might be seen in this capitalist world we live in. And I, rather than giving advice or telling them how to do things or what to do, I create a structure through facilitated sessions with these men to help them open up to each other and themselves through brotherhood. And the primary focus of the work that I do is through mirroring and reflection. And so what I tell these men when they come in and what they end up experiencing is that no matter what they're going through in life, whether it be a divorce, business ending, death, any number of challenging moments, as well as moments to celebrate, that they're not alone. That almost every man, or almost every situation that a man is experiencing that I work with, there's another man in the group that has experienced it, usually multiple men that have gone through what he's gone through, and can provide not only support but also perspective. And the biggest thing is providing a space to be heard where someone else can understand and empathize, where they really feel that they're not alone. And that's that's really the work that I do. And I guess in one word would be connection, helping men connect with themselves, each other, and the world around us.
I love that. It's so beautiful, and there's a simplicity to it that I appreciate. Yeah, I often work with people one on one, and they will, there's some issue, there's some problem, there's something they're going through, and reflecting to them, well, you're not alone in that, can be really powerful. But I imagine more impactful in a group, like actually seeing other people nod and resonate and express that they're not alone. Because in the context of a lot of traditional therapy, that sense of like being kind of on your own could, I'm just reflecting right now, like it could be there in the room because you just there with the therapist or a coach, and there's magic and there's power in a group dynamic. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And how I see it, and I've certainly benefited from and still do from one-on-one coaching and therapy. And the difference is in the groups that I lead, instead of one person reflecting back, there's 11 others reflecting back what they see. And so the depth of reflection and the depth of perspective that's offered is so much richer. And the other piece that I think is even more profound is, and this kind of relates to my background, is we can often be surrounded by many people. I often have been surrounded by many people that have been close friends, and I've still felt alone. I've still felt like I didn't belong, like I was an outcast, like I couldn't relate, like I was not fully understood. And I think that's the big difference, is that the way that we are connecting is in a way that really invites in true vulnerability and acceptance and love and mutual understanding of each other, and first of ourselves, in a place that is brave, that invites us to step forward and open up in ways that we're not hiding behind a mask anymore. And so the
Mm.
loneliness, even when we're surrounded by others, drops when we drop that mask and we allow ourselves to be seen, and we can truly step forward into the man that we've always felt deep down we truly are.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think loneliness is such a big issue in our society. In fact, the Surgeon General of the United States of America issued a kind of statement around loneliness and called it an epidemic. And um, I don't think it's not just men, of course, but I think there is something unique to men, to feeling that more, to that American sense of having to kind of take care of everything, being responsible for everything yourself, that kind of cowboy mentality, that lone wolf, the hero. Some of the stories we grew up with in movies, it's the lone hero standing against 10,000 people, somehow, winning the battle or saving the earth or whatever it is. And there's something beautiful about that and something powerful about that, but also, yeah, that's that's a lonely place to be. Um,
Yeah, that's absolutely one part of it. And that's, I see that show up in some of the business leaders that I work with, where they've taken on all this on their backs, and it's the reaching out for help is challenging, and it's almost a virtue of I can do it all on my own. And I find this deep desire for them to not have to do it all alone. And I think the other piece of this, societally, that's important to point out is, when we compare men and women, traditionally women are the ones that are in community in more open and intimate ways. At dinner with couples, it's often the women that go to the restroom at the same time. And so they're already, as part of their culture, taking space away to have time amongst themselves. And we as men, at least what I've experienced in my younger years, was this kind of fear of intimacy, fear of opening up to another man. And whether it was this programming of, oh, well, that I might be seen as gay, or, I'm not really sure what the programming was. But there was something that created this blockage and this fear of opening up, fear of really naming what I might have wanted from another man in a friendship, and really claiming that as a true desire. And so that created these walls, and what became, I guess, a proxy for that true connection and intimacy was sports and drugs and these other things that could become the focal point rather than each other, rather than looking another man in the eye and telling him how I really feel.
Yeah, yeah, I can completely resonate and relate to what you're sharing, and I think it's super important. It's a really big topic. There's a lot of roads we could go down here. I'm just kind of reflecting on, I tend to hold a perspective of there's a biological evolutionary reality. When we talk, there's like evolutionary psychology, and I think, and there's also our cultural conditioning and what we learn, and so many different variety of cultures in different ways. And I think in an ideal world, we would all feel seen and supported by our parents and attuned to, and a sense of love and support and also challenge. And I think perhaps there's an evolutionary biological component to men actually having a healthy stage of life where they do go out on their own and find their own way, but then ideally either coming back to or staying connected with community. And there's kind of even the idea of like the hero's journey. There is this idea of going out, leaving the comfort of what you grew up with, finding yourself or finding God or finding truth or finding some gift and bringing that back then to the community. But I think in our modern world, what you're speaking to is absolutely spot on. And there's, an alienation, a lack of belonging, a sense of loneliness, and then a sense of having to do it all on your own. And we're not seeing modeled that deeper connection among men that could be there. And so maybe we can start healing that, start creating a new culture where there is more vulnerability and authenticity there. So,
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate the metaphor there of the hero's journey. And as you were speaking of that, I was, thinking of why doesn't it feel like that? And you said the comfort of home, and to me, in a way, it almost felt like a discomfort of home. I wanted to get out and away, and when I did, the activities I engaged in were pretty destructive, both to self and other. And it was almost like this rebellion against who I thought I had to be. I don't even know how conscious that was, but it was this guise of under the guise of partying and what felt like connection, but was really just numbing and escaping. And it took a while to kind of finally go on my own real hero's journey as I started to kind of drift away from that lifestyle and explore myself more within. And as part of that, I think what I'm learning now is yes, it is important for solo time and self exploration. And I would say I gain as much, if not more, knowledge, wisdom, experience about who I am when I'm in connection and in relation with others that can reflect that back to me.
hmm. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you speaking from your own experience, really, and like looking at your life. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people going off to college is that kind of leaving the nest thing. And then a lot of people I work with, myself too, it's like, yeah, there's partying, there's drinking, there's fraternity, sorority scene, or whatever version of that. But it might not feel very authentic. You might not feel really seen. And so you're speaking to this phenomena that we can experience of being surrounded by people that know us on some level, and yet feeling alone inside, and then numbing that, right? Like it's that kind of. I think that's way more common than it should be. It's not good.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. That feeling kind of always felt below the surface. And looking back, I think it was because I didn't know who I was, and the easiest way to kind of escape that feeling was through drugs and alcohol, and that gave me this false sense of empowerment and courage and these things these qualities that I wanted in myself. And uh, yeah, it's almost like I felt I could be a different person, and I felt like I was more accepted even if I was destructive and I wasn't anymore accepted, it felt that way. And so, yeah, I was able to escape this feeling of not being who or what I should be.
Hmm. Yeah. And what, like for you, what was it that had you shift out of that to turn away from that lifestyle?
Yeah, short answer, psychedelics. Long answer, it was beginning to take small steps towards doing more of what I want rather than doing what I thought others might want me to do. Uh, to bring more context into that, a lot of my behaviors and activities and what I was quote interested in a younger age was based out of this fear of loneliness and wanting to be with others, even if I wasn't interested in what they were doing or felt that it was right for me. I was trying to get attention, trying to be accepted, trying to be who I thought others wanted me to be. And when I moved out to Colorado 11 years ago, that things started to shift then when uh, I started to realize that nature was more important to me than being in a bar. I started to realize that music was important to me, that the work I was doing wasn't really connected to my soul. And I started to find these breadcrumbs towards a version of myself that uh, I saw myself as when I was a young child and kind of pre-teenage years. And I started to reconnect with interests of mine that I had as a young child, but I hadn't been involved in years. Something as simple as reading. I'm a voracious reader now, but there was a good 2 decades of my life where I didn't read a thing. And I started to rediscover how to express myself in creative ways, to really tap back into who I was. And that turning point really opened me back up to my childlike curiosity that had been uh, muted for so long.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. I appreciate you sharing about reading too. I think that's so important. It's an important part of my life that I also have kind of gotten away from as much, and lately also making time for intentionally. Like last night, I cracked open a couple books, and like it's. I think that there's a larger cultural thing around reading. Our attention span has been under attack, and it's harder for us to actually finish a chapter, let alone a sentence these days, without looking at our phone. But yeah, this like getting in touch with what's true for you, what's authentic. And I appreciate you mentioning psychedelics helped open you up, that you wanted to make some changes in your lifestyle and what you were doing. And I'm curious if those experiences with psychedelics were on your own or if they were with people, because you've spoken to how a lot of your growth has been with other people.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that question, and that'll kind of bring us around to another topic here that's part of this conversation, and that's they started in music festivals. They started in environments with music, nature, dancing, and they were often with others around and alone. And what I mean by that is I might have been taking something with a couple friends next to me, but my experience was very solo, and uh, I I used to use quite heavy amounts, and so I'd kind of be in my own deep world and would go into this deep existential hole of kind of evaluating my whole life and seeing where things might have been misaligned, uh, and it really took me out of presence of the situation I was in. Uh, and looking back, there were some transformative moments there, uh, and I think the piece that's also helpful to focus on is this was before I had discovered these substances in a ceremonial context and in a therapeutic context. And that's kind of what I mean by alone. It wasn't in this instance of, we're going to uh, commune with these spirits and do this in a way where we're together and we're holding space for each other. It was mostly in kind of chaotic environments, and I think it was carrying through my pattern of numbing and escaping just with a different substance. And so in that case, maybe I was tricking myself, but also, uh, these drugs had a powerful way of kind of creating some openings in me and creating some cracks in the surface of what I might have saw myself or my life as. Um, and the connection here to this other piece is when these were in festival environments, the interesting piece is I I found myself often using these substances to connect deeper to the festival experience than finding myself being more pulled out of the experience through the heavy use of these. Uh, and I see that a lot in these environments, and I see this desire for connection a lot, and I see these escapist tendencies a lot, and so that's been a huge inspiration for what I have been bringing through at Unison Festival the past few years, and bringing through the biggest production to date this year in the Men's Lodge, a space where men can come together intentionally, not only for men's work based workshops, but also for connection and meaning and brotherhood and being able to really open up to what they're bringing into the festival in a way that it can be supported and held, and they can hopefully find a path forward that's more authentic and supportive for who they want to be.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm excited and grateful to be a part of the Men's Lodge this year and be down there. And I think Unison is a really special festival in my experience. It's often called my favorite festival that I've been to. But yeah, I think you're naming a lot of important pieces here. I think it's good to obviously psychedelic medicines to be really careful with them, and there's a danger in what you're speaking to of taking especially higher doses in a chaotic, loud environment, and also the reality that a lot of people are doing that, and the reality that it can be beneficial, it can be helpful. Um, a lot of people I know who have gone down the psychedelic path, maybe they started off the way you're describing and then kind of evolved to a place of doing it more ceremonially or on their own or in nature. Um, I think I just wanted to speak to, in general, psychedelics are very opening, and if you're in a loud, chaotic environment, there's a risk of, honestly, a kind of trauma to one degree or another, or and there's different ways you could talk about that, but there's also potential for insight and healing and an opening. So I kind of have an open mind around it. But ideally, a festival experience like Unison is doing their best part to try to create a safe place for everyone, and acknowledging the reality of the world we're in. And I think there is a place for that kind of exploration in that context. And ideally, people can become more informed or educated, do it in a more intelligent way, maybe have a light dose. Some people are microdosing or mini. I've heard some people talk about mini dosing versus like a macrodose being more my tendency to. But everyone, there's ways you can set yourself up for success, and to know yourself. But I have definitely, when this subject of psychedelics comes up on the podcast, there's something in me that wants to speak to the shadow side, the potential for harm, the potential for risk, and that I've personally worked with people who have, for example, wound up in the hospital because they took a handful of mushrooms and had no idea what they were getting into. And so that's just good to be aware of that, like with anything. Of course, there's a lot more people winding up in the ER from drinking too much alcohol. So I think it's good to have that more mature perspective and look at it all. But yeah.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, just comes down to something very simple that even I'm still learning to do, and that's check in with myself. And I believe the more that we truly take the time and space to check in with what we really need, rather than looking outside of ourselves to maybe what everyone else is doing, or just unconsciously just consume a lot. And I think, yes, of course, when it comes to psychedelics, that's important. And I think it's important with everything, with the technology and media and uh, the foods and just all the things that we consume societally, and what that does to us. And so, yeah, especially these compounds that are very powerful. All the things we consume have an effect on our state of being, and this all comes down to the what I think is so simple yet challenging to really ingrain as a regular practice of just checking in and asking myself, what do I need? And instead of like thinking about it and analyzing it, really just feeling into my body and having those asking those curious questions. And when I do notice maybe the urge or desire for more of anything, asking maybe where that's coming from, and is that covering something up, masking something? Is that running away from something? As has certainly been my tendency a lot. Is it this desire, this constant craving for more, more, more? And just like eating too much ice cream, having more of something might make a good experience into a terrible experience. And so uh, I've learned a lot of things the hard way, and uh, my desire for others is maybe not to go down that path. And the more that I think we can all learn to check in with ourselves, the more we can start showing up for ourselves in more healthy ways.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. That process of checking in with yourself is so important. And it could be like the definition of mindfulness, really, like checking in, being honest. And it's not about being perfect, right? And that there's a deeper intuition and knowing that you're speaking to that I appreciate. And it's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. How did you get involved with bringing this to Unison?
I went to Unison the first year it existed, which I guess was 4 years ago now. Yeah, 2021. And loved it. Thought it was just such a cool festival. It was at the time super small. I think maybe 800 people were there, and on the banks of the Animas River, and sand everywhere, and just was. It felt unlike any festival I had been to before. It really had a ceremonial vibe. Felt more focused on uh, connection and interaction, and rather than everyone just being focused on uh, the stage, people were focused on each other, and there was more weaving and dancing with each other, and it felt like a community. And I noticed this was also the first time I had seen a festival have a women's tent. In its first year, there was a moon lodge and women's village. And at the time, I was kind of just getting started in leading men's work. I had just led my first men's group and was leading a retreat, or had led my first retreat uh, earlier that year. And when I saw that the women had a special place for them, I thought, well, why not men? And so the following year, I'd reached out to the festival producers and asked if they'd be willing to have me lead a men's space. They said sure. And so it started out with very humble beginnings. We kind of were able to help put together a teepee, thanks to the help of some others there at the festival. Super small space. We had I think one or two councils a day, and I don't know, maybe 12 to 15 people at each one, and was a beautiful space to men drop in daily. And my vision from there was to have a bigger space to bring through workshops. And so that was last year, where we expanded our space. We had a few workshops a day. And it was beautiful to see the diversity of workshops being led, the diversity of styles of men's work coming through, uh, and the diversity of men showing up for these workshops. Some men showed up for every single one. Others would pop into one, some in between, and what I saw were men truly opening up, and in an environment that seems mostly about partying. These men were getting real, and they were processing grief, and they were really connecting and opening up and sharing things that they had never shared in a group before. It was beautiful. And so, where I really see this is meeting men where they're at. Where are men going to meet new people, connect with people, express themselves, have fun, open up? Uh, and maybe still have a desire for more. And as we spoke to, not only psychedelics opening people up, but I believe these experiences open people up. And so being in an environment like that where these men are open, well, what a better place to leverage that openness towards something deeper. And so this year we're expanding our space even larger to a 40 by 40 tent. We're going to have 4 workshops per day and tea and cacao lounge in the evenings as a vibey chill space. And we're going to invite women into the space in the evenings as well. And again, really just continuing to expand that vision uh, of intentional connection in the space where we're so open.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I was at the first Unison Festival too, and I remember Parangi performing as an amazing person and artist. And every time I've seen him get on stage, it's a ceremony, and it's very explicitly a ceremony, and he's very intentionally inviting the audience in, and that's a moment that stands out for me. Um, and yeah, I think I remember I taught a workshop there that year, and then I wasn't there the next year, but super excited to be back there this year, and I was there last year too. But like, I think Unison is a good example of a what you could call it more conscious festival, more intentional festival. It really has these intentions that you're speaking to, not just for men, of course, but for everyone to be able, if they want, to open, to drop in deeper, to have some new experiences, to really feel connected in community. And I think that's what draws people there, and it can be the medicine that we need in our society, which is so atomized, so individualized, so independent. Um, and there's something really special, of course, about being there in the flesh, in person. Our senses are engaged. We're seeing other people. We're hearing music. We're moving our bodies. We're there by the river. We're there outside. Because so much of our life is through the screen these days. And in a sense, we're more connected than we ever have been in human history, theoretically, through our phones, through social media. But the felt sense is not one of greater connection. The felt sense is often one of me versus the world, or do I fit in, or am I being heard? Does anyone really see me? Does any of this really matter? That kind of, it's like easy to go there in today's world. I think partly, because of our technology. And I think an experience like Unison ideally can really be the balm for that, a different kind of experience and a different kind of connection. And I love the idea of this men's lodge, a space just for men during the day, these workshops specifically for men. I mean, it's obviously not like a police, it's like if someone really wanted to go in there, they could walk in there, but that's the intention. But then I love the idea at night of opening up to everyone and having some music, having tea, having a space to talk. To me, that there's something about that feels special, that feels really heartwarming, and that feels really right. Because we're doing this work as men, but then we are also, like bringing to the world or opening up or not be too tight about it or controlled about it. There's something special about that when I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see us as men as the ones that can really hold space and provide. And so yeah, it's an honor to open up our space in the evenings to everyone and really just have it be a space for people to come and chill. And at night there's going to be uh, the dance temple going off for those that want to get down and dirty, and then as people want to chill, we'll have a space for that too, right across the river. And what you were speaking to before that, I think, is so important. Just thinking, even you and I, we've only met in this technological capacity, and I'm so excited to not only meet you in the flesh, but also all the other facilitators coming through into our space. Uh, but the other piece there was this piece of being in a festival environment, a peak experience. I've found myself in my life so caught up in chasing these peak experiences. I would say addicted to that feeling of euphoria, and then kind of coming back down to earth, and once the experience ends, having this like craving for more, and this almost depression of sorts of this letdown that this peak experience is no more. And so I've gone into like a low, and what I really hope for this space is to create an off ramp from this peak experience, to offer tools and uh, empowered steps forward so that what is gained from this experience isn't just a flash in the pan peak experience that there's a desire to chase more of, but it's something that really provides a deeper fulfillment and an opportunity to maybe shift a path towards deeper alignment with each individual, or to just come into uh, a deeper place of home within oneself, so that as they leave, they feel more ready and refreshed to enter the world rather than drained and more disconnected.
That's beautiful. That's a great intention. Yeah, I can 100% relate to the experience of chasing peak experiences, having some kind of peak experience, and then coming down, coming back to earth, feeling depressed, feeling down. Um, yeah, it's just interesting to note music is an altered state experience, dancing is an altered state experience, cacao is going to shift our state, maybe open up our heart, let alone other substances we could add on. And I think when we stack all these things together, it's like you're doing a lot. It's good to like appreciate that. And there might be an exploration around, yeah, like less rather than more at times, and finding integration and finding kind of the framework I come from is really the Buddhist framework of getting in touch with our natural state, our natural way of being, which is one of openness, of connection, of compassion, of open-heartedness. In the Buddhist teachings, that's like, our basic way of being that we just would be in naturally. And so we don't have to add things on to get there. But sometimes things can help us open up to that or have an insight into that. And then we can learn to tune into that all the time, intent, at least ideally, or at least theoretically. Not that I do that or am perfect at it or anything like that, but that it doesn't, how it's just been so impactful for me to come back again and again to it's not something outside of myself. And
Yeah,
that can be a guiding light back to our heart, back to our center.
yeah, yeah. It's a practice, and it involves this reprogramming. As I see it, and I've experienced it, I thought what I needed to make my life complete, to make me feel better, to fulfill me was what was outside of me. And it's this practice of coming back home to what's within. Just like I was speaking to before, like checking in with ourselves. I think this is turning into ourselves. And as I stated before as well, like in relation to each other, in these workshops that are meant to help us express ourselves, to connect through play, through dance, through conversation, breath, etc. I find all of that being a way of connecting deeper with who we are, and I think that it's a training ground for regaining our agency and regaining uh, our connection to what's true within us, so that we don't lose sight of it when we see these shiny new things outside of us. And all this is speaking from personal experience. Uh, and one of the other, personal reasons why I bring this through in a festival is to give me more of a purpose, so that I don't go into my past patterns of getting lost in the spectacle of what's happening outside of myself. But I'm really able to come from a place of service and offer my gifts, and also celebrate and have fun too. But with my primary purpose being through and or being coming through with this space, it offers me an opportunity to really anchor myself in a deeper purpose of why I'm here.
Beautiful. Yeah. And that sense of purpose is so important I think for most adults, right? Most humans, but especially for men to feel a sense of purpose and meaning in the work you're doing in the world. Um, it's interesting that the microcosm of the festival world, there's often, I mean, this is true for me. Like I remember going to Burning Man for the first time, right? It changed my life. It was a wild, weird, up and down week, but at the end of it, I was like, felt like my life was changing. I felt so touched and so connected and so kind of blown away by all the art and all the generosity and all the giving and all the beauty and all the people. And then there was a desire in me to go back, but to go back and offer something, to go back and give a workshop or teach yoga or bring something there, help build and that's just the beautiful part of it. That's why Burning Man exists. That's and the same thing I think with Unison of like go and experience, and then maybe a calling to come back and contribute more and help other people to have that experience and help be a part of it and participate in it. It's a we're in a participatory universe. We're all creating this, and it's a kind of magical spell we've fallen under of being a passive consumer of information, movies, TV, media, the news. That's disempowering and it's like draining our life force, you know. And I think the festival world, ideally, even camping, being out in nature, it forces you like, hey, if I want to eat tonight, I've got to build a fire here. I've got to get the stove going. I've got to get my shit together. I'm not gonna be able to call up Domino's. And there's something we really need that in our modern world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. In a sense, it can be if we approach it as such. Yeah, an opportunity to coming back to our tribal roots and building a camp together with a crew of friends is like building a community and a tribe. And okay, we're all going to contribute a little bit, and we're going to come together, and we're going to gather and celebrate together, and that's another really special part that I'm grateful to have cultivated is yeah, a strong crew of friends that gathers at this festival every year. And yeah, it really feels like a reunion of sorts, a coming together. And because we don't have technology in our faces, and also just the regular schedules and obligations of daily life, we have that space to be able to just be
Mm.
present with each other, and that's super special. And in that presence, there's really a deep opportunity. And another reason why this men's lodge is there, it's an invitation for presence. Stepping into this space might be different than outside of the space where there's maybe a bit more chaos, where there's distractions all over. This can be a space to really drop in and be there for one purpose, and that purpose can just be to be present and open and curious uh, what's in front of us.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, I'm curious, like, someone could be listening to this and they might think this sounds good and I get this, but why the men's lodge? Why separate out men versus women? Why have a group that's open just to men? Why do a men's group? Why work with men? How would you speak to that?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, because as you mentioned that, I realized, yeah, there's a regular workshop space and so many other areas where we can learn, where we can connect. Uh, I find that it's so important for men to gather with each other for a couple of reasons. One is I've found in myself and in witnessing other men sometimes a performative aspect to how we show up when women are around, whether consciously or unconsciously. Whether it's a role that is maybe ingrained or programmed in us evolutionarily, or a behavior pattern that we're used to showing up as a way of maybe posturing or even attracting the other sex, or uh, there's that dynamic that I think can possibly get in the way. The other is connected to what I spoke to earlier. This what I found was a challenge of connecting intimately with other men, and really creating and cultivating fulfilling relationships with other men. I felt this blockage of really opening up and learning to open up to other men and creating brave spaces for men to open up to each other uh, has created a deeper opening to self. It's helped me understand myself better. And as helpful as it can be with another woman, there's something about the relatability, the understanding that when men are able to get to a place where they're open and vulnerable, it's there's a permission giving, and it's about that permission to open up and expose what's really deep, that I find creates this ripple effect that I've found the depth to be uh, far more than in a mixed gender environment. Uh, and lastly, the other piece I'll just share is there's there's an invitation to let out this kind of primal side to us that I think gets dampened in our world. maybe the shadow side of that, of like rage, might come out, or violence. Uh, but I think it's healthy for us to express our primal side, to really let that out. And uh, in these spaces, it's safe to do so. And then in cultivating this brave space for it, uh, it opens up the invitation to let that out. And so there's, I guess the last piece I'll share is that there's a box that I see kind of the modern man being put in over the past century or so, of we can't show our feelings and be emotive and go into the radical feminine side. Uh, it's not safe to do that because we might be seen as weak or a sissy, or else that might be labeled. And then we can't go too much into the masculine side either, because then we're making others feel unsafe, and then we're getting into this part of feeling or being unhinged. And I I feel it's very important for us to explore the full spectrum of what it is to be a man, explore our full spectrum of masculinity without putting ourselves in any kind of a box or limiting ourselves. And so it's a playground. It's a safe space to explore and play in all of what it means to be who we are. And I've seen that that's much more. Yeah, that's cultivated at a much more uh, at a much better level when it's a men's only container.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That all makes a lot of sense to me. It's almost like, I mean, there's a real need here that our culture's lost touch with. Like, unless you seek out a men's group or this men's lodge, here, or it's just you could going through your life without experiencing that. Like, there's just not many places where I guess like sports or a locker room is one place, right, where you could find that kind of male camaraderie, or maybe there are other places, but the intentionality you're speaking to and the intention to be authentic, to be vulnerable, and to do it in a place where you're not going to be judged or rejected or have your reputation tarnished. Or because I think you're absolutely right. A lot of men in the world today, first of all, the whole idea of being a man, of masculinity itself, feels under attack a lot of time. And second of all, it's like, I mean, you said put in a box. It's like, yeah, it's like, where do you go? How do you, if I don't particularly agree that emotionality is feminine, but you'll hear a lot of people say that. Or think there's a pervasive belief of that. I mean, but it's absurd. Of course, humans, we have emotions, and men get angry at times, and that male anger is pretty taboo in our world today. There's not a lot of places in society, so it's coming out in the shadows all the time, right? It comes out on Twitter, it comes out online, it comes out through a snide comment, it comes out at the gym when you can like feel it, but you don't have to actually express it to anyone. It's like,
Well, and I would add to that to say, as taboo as that might be, what's even more taboo is sadness. I
mm,
think anger is much more accepted for men to show than sadness is. And I think the anger is really often a mask for a deeper sadness that is unable to be expressed.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of times I've noticed sadness is underneath anger. Um, but it feels like just a koan, a kind of question, a kind of there's no right answer here, but a lot of men I work with, anger comes up, and then they're like, "What the fuck do I do with this? I'm fucking filled with rage this morning." And it's like, I don't have some answer I can give you. I can give you some tools or tips, or we can hash it out here. You can express it here. But I think a men's group is a good tool, a good option, and
Mhm.
there's something about, I mean, anger in general is going to be a difficult emotion, but male anger, people are afraid of it for good, there's reasons
Yeah.
for that. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess the other piece to continue answering your question of why in a men's only space, this dynamic between genders has been one of men power over women instead of power with. And in addition to that, a lot of men have used their significant others, the significant others of the opposite sex, as their therapist and as their only support system. And I believe that it's on us as men to not only clear our shit that's in the way of us opening up to sharing power and empowering uh, more women. And I think a lot of the control comes from our own repressed fear and anger and sadness, and so I think it's on us to do this shit ourselves by
Hmm.
coming back together, by uh, getting out of this old mentality of I can do it alone, I don't need anyone. Uh, it's on us men, I think, to come back together in healthy ways. Uh, and you mentioned camaraderie in locker room, and uh, yes, and sometimes camaraderie is not always uh, authentic. Sometimes it's this mob mentality of maybe something being shared that everyone gets on board with, even if it's not true to them.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
I think the facilitated group model is so important because there's a structure that can be upheld that holds us accountable to the agreements that we set with each other, that holds us accountable to uh, what we speak that we want for ourselves, and we're able to redirect each other back on track when we notice drifting back into old patterns and habits um, that we ourselves have spoken about, that we don't want to be a part of our lives and don't want to be a part of our future. And so I find that coming together as men helps us show up more fully in all the other areas of our life that truly matter, whether it's with our children, our significant others, those that we work with. It's again, it's a training ground for life.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I want to appreciate your point about sadness. I think that's a good point. And yeah, for sure, it feels it feels very taboo too to publicly express sadness. We never see it really. Um, yeah, and I think it's good to. I mean, it's great if there's men groups out there and people can find them and choose to join them. I wonder if in the future there could be more of an intergenerational component. What would it be like to have a men's group that includes a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, at least to some degree or for part of it, versus having to go through, until your 20s and 30s and then finding out this whole thing and being like, wow, why didn't I know about this when I was 15 and I felt completely alone and suicidal and like everything was completely pointless. And I don't know the
Yeah.
answer there. I mean, it's a big societal issue, but I think it's worth raising the point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of that is one, not having the best male role models. The other is lack of true rites of passage in this society. Uh, and I know things are popping up. I personally know of men that lead rites of passage retreats for adolescent and teenage boys, and that's beautiful to see. And in the men's group I lead, our age ranges from low 30s to 70s. And so I find that diversity of age is extremely beneficial to everyone in the group, to have these more youthful and in a lot of cases more emotionally aware men, and then the older ones that are from older generations that might be much more kind of shut down, but have so much life experience and are so open to um, wanting to live in a new way for
Mm,
themselves and for others in their lives that they really care about.
beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting just to come back to the festival experience with Unison, like the impact that the women's tent and the men's lodge just kind of has on the collective in that little microcosm. To know that it's there and like on some level just to feel that sense of balance and that if someone wants it, it's there. Maybe they don't need it, but I think it does something collectively just to have that space and that acknowledgement. I guess there's maybe for some people listening, perhaps there's a bit of an elephant in the room. We're talking about women's tent, men's lodge. Any thoughts to share on people who don't identify as either gender? I guess for me,
Yeah.
I hope if someone's listening to this, they can see where this is coming from and appreciate it. And it's not meant to be exclusionary in a negative sense, that and it's also Yeah, I just feel like there could be a possibility for other spaces too. Like it's not like it has to be the fact that there's a men's lodge doesn't mean that there can't be other groups or spaces or things. Like it's not like that. It doesn't have to be a limiting thing. Um, so that's just one thing to
Yeah,
keep in mind.
exactly. I mean, it's our space is open to anyone that identifies as a man, and that's for the reasons I expressed earlier. And I believe that we men are in a world and have mostly been brought up in a way that coming together in this specific space helps us reconnect with ourselves and each other positively. And I think it could be really supportive to have another space. There was talk from the festival of having another space this year. The person that was going to lead that kind of went dark and never responded. And so that space wasn't there because that person hasn't stepped up and said, "Hey, I want to take this on." That's what I did. That's what Cree did, who's running the women's space. And so the invitation's there. The festival is 100% open to it, and they're waiting for someone to take that on. So I 100% agree with that, and uh, yeah, it's this isn't from a place of this is only for us, not for you. This is this is an intentional space for a certain type of work that helps us do what I believe we can do to help heal ourselves and each other. And yeah, the more of these types of spaces, the better.
I love that. Yeah. So there's an invitation. I mean, to create that here in the future, maybe in other festivals or other situations. That's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, maybe a last question. Do you have any particularly inspiring influences, books, teachers that have been powerful for you that you would want to share with people?
Mm, so many. Yeah, where to begin? I guess I'll go to a few. My my favorite is Young Pueblo. I so appreciate his words, his prose, the way that his poetry just is so potent and just hits and helps me see parts of myself, my life, my relationships in such a beautiful way. Uh, uh, all of his books I'd recommend, specifically uh, his book Lighter, and most recently his book of poetry, The Way Forward. Uh, Others, this is a very under the radar book by Anthony DeMello called Awareness. That's a book that I've brought forward in my groups before. That uh, it's not even really an official book. It is a book, but it's written, taken out of a bunch of his lectures. And the most beautiful book I've ever read on awareness. And my philosophy, everything is about awareness. The more awareness we gain, the more everything starts to shift in the direction of our true self and our true desires. Uh, those are the most potent. There's a slew of others. I'll throw one more out there. Uh, Don Miguel Ruiz, not only the Four Agreements, but all of his books have just been so profound, so simple, and so beautiful in the themes of uh, what really serves us, our communities, and others in how we show up in the world. And
Hmm.
I think that's what it's all about.
Love that. Thanks. Those are some great
Yeah,
suggestions.
yeah.
I guess I'll add one or two. The book Iron John, just like such a classic by Robert Bly, that was had a big impact on me, and I think kind of helped start the modern men's movement.
Mhm.
A beautiful book. Yeah, and then King, Warrior, Magician, Lover is another one that I've shared with you before we started recording that I've been
Mhm.
looking at again.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot out there, and it's cool to see it growing, and there's a lot of more organizations and more people offering this, and yeah, it's a big world. You
Yeah.
know, I'm a big fan of the expression both and rather than either or, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. And so just to touch on non-binary, trans people, all that. It's like, let's have a both and here. Let's have space for it all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
kind of
And
my.
I appreciate when you ask books and teachers, it's interesting because my mind didn't even go to ones that are specifically about men's work or men or masculinity even in general. Mine go more to, I guess, what I see. Uh, we can say everyone, but what I notice, maybe men more than anyone, maybe uh, the opportunities we have to improve ourselves. And that's kind of what I look for in those. And the books you mentioned too, yeah, extremely powerful and really getting into uh, the archetypal element of who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And any last words or thoughts for us?
Mm. Yeah, my last words are: you're not alone. You're never alone. As lonely as you might feel, as dark of a place as you might be in, when the shame feels like a deep hole that you can never climb out of, and it's easier to isolate, paradoxically, the only way out is through connection. And that's might be the hardest thing to do in those moments, and it's so easier to say than to do. Um, but I hope these words resonate in all of you that might be listening, and know that you're not alone. Know that there are those out here that care and that have felt and probably do feel way more often than we admit, very similarly.
I love that. Thanks. Yeah, and I'll link to your website and stuff like that with the show notes. That just reminds me, I had a teacher in a psychedelic therapy training who said, "You're never alone. How could you be alone?"
Mhm.
And the way they said it in the context was so beautiful. That's a great message. It's good to remember that, even if it doesn't feel like that. We can remind ourselves. We can remember that.
Yeah, yeah, and to even take us out of the human element of, we're surrounded by all these humans, yes, and there's trees, there's grass, there's animals, there's life all around us, and so uh, just being in nature, I think, really helps bring me back to that sense.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, for me personally, if I'm being honest, there's been some moments alone in nature where I actually felt the most connected with what you were just speaking to, including people, but the larger world. I think that's obviously not unique to me, but there's it's an interesting paradox that sometimes we can feel so connected when we're actually not talking to someone. We're not, we're opening to what's here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and yeah, I'll end with a plug as well. The men's community that I run is called Hearts of Men. We mostly serve professional men, CEOs, entrepreneurs, executives, business professionals that are looking for deeper connection, more intimate, fulfilling relationships with men. And we're a brotherhood that meets regularly. We have men that meet virtually from all over the country, and we have in-person retreats as well, and currently forming groups and leading new experiences. So if you're interested, heartsofmen.org, and yeah, more info will be in the show notes.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Julian.